She learned endurance before she ever learned hope. From an early age, life demanded strength from her without offering comfort in return. Loss arrived quietly but stayed forever, shaping her into someone who carried responsibility far heavier than her years. Every step forward was earned through effort, not luck, and every small achievement came at the cost of exhaustion she never spoke about. She grew up understanding that the world was not gentle, especially to someone like her. Opportunities were rare, kindness even rarer. Still, she refused to surrender to bitterness. Instead, she built herself from resilience, discipline, and quiet determination. She learned to trust her own hands more than promises and her own heart more than expectations. Love was never something she believed was meant for her. Survival came first, dreams second, and happiness somewhere far beyond reach. Yet beneath her strength lived a fragile hope she kept hidden, a belief that maybe one day, life would give her more than just the need to endure. He rose to the top of his world through control, precision, and an unbreakable will. Power came easily to him because emotions never interfered. Every decision was calculated, every relationship measured by usefulness. In his life, success was everything, and sentiment had no place. Raised to believe that weakness invited destruction, he learned to silence feelings before they could take root. Trust was dangerous, attachment unnecessary. People admired him, feared him, and respected him, but no one truly knew him. His world was built on glass towers, sharp rules, and endless ambition. Despite everything he owned, something within him remained untouched. He lived surrounded by influence yet disconnected from meaning. Love was a concept he understood only in theory, a distraction for others, never for a man who had trained himself to feel nothing at all. Their lives intersected without intention, brought together by circumstances neither of them controlled. She entered his world quietly, not seeking attention or favor, carrying herself with a calm strength shaped by hardship. There was nothing deliberate about her presence, yet it disrupted the careful order he had built around himself. He noticed her in ways that surprised him. It was not her appearance alone, but the resilience in her posture, the patience in her silence, and the dignity with which she carried unseen burdens. She did not ask for sympathy or recognition, and that quiet independence unsettled him more than defiance ever could for her. He was simply another powerful figure she had learned to navigate around, but something about his gaze lingered longer than expected. In that brief crossing, something shifted for both of them, subtle yet irreversible, setting in motion a change neither could yet understand. Circumstances tightened around them, drawing an invisible line that bound their lives together. What began as necessity quickly took on a deeper weight, shaped by protection, obligation, and power. His decision was firm and unquestioned, driven by instinct more than logic. Control had always been his strength, and claiming responsibility felt like the most natural response to a situation he refused to leave to chance. To him, possession meant safety. By keeping her close, he believed he could manage the risk, silence the uncertainty, and maintain order. Yet beneath that certainty lay an unfamiliar tension, one that unsettled him in ways he could not explain. The more he asserted control, the more aware he became of her presence, her influence quietly settling into his thoughts. For her, the bond felt overwhelming and sudden. She had survived by standing alone, never belonging to anyone, never being claimed by another's will. Now she found herself pulled into a world defined by power and protection, unsure whether it offered security or another kind of danger. What neither of them realized was that in trying to claim her, he had already begun to lose the one thing he valued most: his emotional distance. Her influence on him was quiet but undeniable. She did not challenge his authority or attempt to change his world. Instead, she existed within it with a calm strength that slowly altered its shape. The rigid edges of his control began to soften, not through defiance, but through her presence and the unspoken trust growing between them. He found himself acting differently without realizing when it began. Decisions once driven solely by logic now carried consideration for her well-being. His protectiveness deepened, no longer rooted in ownership but in concern he could not ignore. The power that once defined him started to feel incomplete without her beside him. For her, His strength became something less intimidating and more human. Beneath his command and authority, she glimpsed a man shaped by isolation and expectation. In reaching him without force, she became the only person capable of turning his power into vulnerability, and in doing so, she transformed him in ways he had never believed possible. As the bond between them deepened, fear followed closely behind it. What had once felt like control now began to feel uncertain, even threatening, to the order he had spent his life perfecting. Emotions crept in where discipline once ruled, and with them came a vulnerability he did not know how to manage. Loving her felt like standing at the edge of something powerful enough to undo him. For her, affection was just as frightening. Trust had never been safe, and dependence had always ended in loss. The care he showed stirred emotions she had learned to suppress, awakening hope alongside fear. Part of her wanted to retreat, to protect the independence that had kept her alive for so long, even as another part longed to believe that this connection could be real. Their growing attachment existed in tension, balanced between desire and self-preservation. Love promised warmth and belonging, yet carried the risk of pain neither of them was prepared to face. In that fragile space, they were drawn closer together even as fear warned them to pull away, making their connection as dangerous as it was irresistible. The truth revealed itself in a way he could no longer deny. When the possibility of losing her became real, everything he had built his identity upon suddenly felt meaningless. Power, reputation, and control offered no protection against the fear that settled deep within him. For the first time, he understood that his strength had limits, and she was the reason her absence, even as a thought, created a hollow ache he could not ignore. The idea of a world without her presence unsettled him more than any threat he had ever faced. What he once believed to be ownership was exposed as dependence, not born of weakness, but of genuine attachment he had never allowed himself before. In that realization, his carefully guarded composure fractured. She had become more than someone under his protection. She was the center of his emotional world. The man who once believed himself untouchable came to understand that his greatest vulnerability was not loss of power, but the depth of love he now carried for her. The struggle within him reached a point where avoidance was no longer possible. Control had shaped every part of his life, offering certainty and distance from pain, but it could no longer contain what he felt. Holding on too tightly began to feel wrong, as though possession was a poor substitute for the connection he truly desired. That he began to loosen the grip he once believed was necessary, allowing trust to take the place of command. In choosing her happiness over his need for certainty, he discovered a strength far deeper than authority. Love demanded vulnerability, patience, and faith, qualities he had never valued until they became essential. For her, the change was unmistakable. She felt seen rather than claimed, protected rather than confined. What bound them was no longer obligation but choice. In releasing control, he did not lose her. Instead, he gained a bond rooted in respect and devotion, proving that love, when freely chosen, was the greatest power he had ever known. She no longer stood on the edges of his life. Through patience, resilience, and quiet strength, she became the center around which his world slowly reorganized itself. The woman who had once lived in survival mode now carried herself with confidence. Her presence no longer defined by fear but by belonging she had earned, not been given. For him, everything shifted. Success and power, once his only measures of worth, faded in importance beside the peace he found in her presence. She grounded him in ways ambition never could, reminding him that fulfillment was not found in control, but in connection. His world, once rigid and isolated, grew warmer and more human because of her. Together, they redefined what strength meant. She brought compassion where there had been distance, and he offered stability where there had been uncertainty. In transforming each other, they built a shared reality rooted not in dominance or survival, but in mutual trust, understanding, and a love that reshaped everything they once believed about themselves. What they built together challenged everything he once believed about power. Strength, he realized, was no longer found in authority or control, but in the ability to care deeply without fear. Love did not weaken him as he had once assumed. It sharpened his purpose and grounded his ambitions in something meaningful. For her, Love became a place of safety rather than sacrifice. The independence she had fought so hard to protect was no longer threatened, but respected. In being loved without conditions, she discovered a confidence that allowed her to stand fully as herself, no longer shaped by survival alone. Their bond grew into something steady and enduring, forged through vulnerability and choice rather than dominance. Together, they proved that true strength lies in mutual respect, trust, and the courage to be emotionally open. What began as possession transformed into partnership, and in that transformation, they found a love powerful enough to redefine them both.